All right. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Good? I hope you are doing just as well as the weather outside. So my name is Katrina, and beside me is my partner Bohar for this introduction section. Along with our group member, we are excited to have you here with our Youth Leadership Initiative group at the Saskatoon Open Door Society. The Youth Leadership Initiative group hosted by the Saskatoon Open Door Society is a gathering place of youth voice and the platform for actions. This year, our program has changed a lot since we can no longer host our annual youth conference, but instead we turn our attention to creating an action plan. So this year, the 3 topics that we selected for this action plan is mental health, mentorship, and environment. So today, our discussion is about the environment. First, we acknowledge that the land on which we gather is a treaty a traditional meeting grounds and gathering place of the Assiniboine, Cree, Dene, Dakota, Saulteaux, and Métis. We acknowledge all the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. As well, we'd like to acknowledge our founders. The Saskatoon Open Door Society's Voice of Youth Leadership Summit is founded by the IRCC and Canada Service Corps. Thank you to the Government of Canada for providing a platform to amplify youth voices.
Hello, everyone again. Before we get into the question and answer session, I do want to reiterate what waste classification actually is. In our context, it's basically sorting out your waste into the 4 different bins or 3 different bins that we have available to us. So compost, recycling, garbage, all that stuff. Our first question is, what do you guys know about waste classification, and what are some of the benefits that you see in your everyday life?
So we just completed the waste reduction and diversion plan at the city, and some of the environmental benefits that I would say is mostly driven by environmental benefits. Obviously, I think the most common one is you have these like material things that are flowing through our economy, and it's inefficient for them to just be made and like extracted from our environment, made into something used maybe once, and then thrown in the garbage and pile up in a landfill. That wastes the materials themselves, energy, and it is quite inefficient. So that's one of the driving factors. And waste also actually generates a fair amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So we think about waste from that kind of climate mitigation is the word we use, side of things, just because especially organics and recyclable materials in the landfill are generating a lot of greenhouse gas emissions because we bury them and then they don't just break down properly like they would in a compost system. And as a result, release a lot of methane. And we're trying to offset that with landfill gas, but we're also trying to set up a curbside organics program. I would say in addition to those environmental benefits, I guess the third one is actually things when they're in the landfill. Some of them are actually quite dangerous. So we have a household hazardous waste program for things like batteries and paints, and some of these things are regulated by the province, and there's other drop-off options, but we collect them as well. And it just keeps those things that you really don't want leaching into our groundwater and into our land out of the landfill. But we also see a lot of social or economic potential with that program. So it could be, or by diverting waste, we're looking more at something we call the circular economy, about keeping those materials in closed loops. So that's it's a kind of an abstract concept that basically you want to be goes back to the reduce, reuse, recycle that you may have heard before, where you really want to keep things, if you need a thing, that you keep it in its like original form as much as possible and just build it right the first time. And there's only so many things that we can do as the city with that, but we want to be part of that, and it's part of our plan. So we see there's a potential for also economic development.
Councillor Gersher, you can go.
Perfect, thank you. I'm happy Katie started because she is an expert in lots of these things. And so when we get information to council and committee, she's one of the folks that we turn to with all of our questions and is able to answer all of them really eloquently. So I'm really grateful she started. And I think one of the, like a waste classification and having the different bins, I think is a really easy way to identify with waste diversions. We've got our blue bin, our green bin, and our black bin. But also how Katie mentioned that there are other ways that I think we can think about waste and actually just reducing less at the beginning. So maybe making less plastic around packaging. There's a lot we can do before we actually get to the point that we need to find a new home for waste. But it's a really easy way that I think we can provide a service to folks in the city. And so, you know, your green bin can be used for food waste. It can be used for yard waste. And we know that right now about 60% of items in people's black bins in their garbage are actually organics. And so it's great to be able to provide an option. And I think that's one of the things that the city can do to help for environmental actions, that there's a lot you can do as an individual, like have a backyard compost, but to be able to actually roll something out citywide, you know, putting in a green bin program will be able to do that. And I know there was, when I was asking for clarification on kind of the waste classification definition, it was talking about what are the benefits of having a separated system as well. And how did you come to that conclusion? Because I know when we were talking about putting the green bin out for everybody, we thought maybe it'd be possible to have bags that your organics can go in and your blue bin can go in, and you could put that in one bin rather than having three. But we have a lot of issues potentially around contamination. And so contamination is just when you have something in your bin that doesn't belong there. And so if a bag of leaves opened up on our recycling, it all have to go to the landfill, as opposed to one being able to go turn into compost and one into other recycled material. And so I think it's kind of a straightforward and most user-friendly way. But I've certainly heard from a lot of folks thinking about what we can do before we even get the garbage into our system or the recycling to reduce that. And I just read a really cool article about 2 students in Saskatoon who are taking plastic and breaking it down and using it in a 3D printer. And so they're finding another use right in Saskatoon. And I think that's it was super exciting to read about. So I will also pass the floor now in case Mayor Clarke wants to add something.
Well, what Katie and Councillor Gersher said is I'm not going to repeat it because there's a lot of expertise there. All I want to say is that probably before any of you would remember, or maybe even were in the city here, but when I just got onto council, we had the way we managed our garbage was one big massive garbage bin in the back alley that multiple households shared. Does anybody remember that? And so you literally have this massive garbage bin, and everybody would just throw. There was no curbside recycling program. There was no organic option. There was almost no alternatives for people to get rid of, to divert waste. And toilets went in there, and all the cans and the bottles and all the things. I guess the only other thing that was in place was like pop bottles and beer bottles. And that was and we just kept piling the landfill, and all of those things that could be recycled, be used, or that puts limits on the amount of garbage people felt that they could throw away, wasn't there. And it's bad for the planet, it's bad financially, it's bad for our landfill. And so it's one thing that the former mayor of New York City named Mike Bloomberg said is you can't manage what you can't measure. So waste classification is very important, because once you actually break down, okay, what are the waste streams and what could they be used for, and how do we best, manage it and collect the information. So what Katie's team does to gather that data, to evaluate it, and then to say, here's what we suggest doing with cardboard. Here's what we suggest doing with, waste coming out of hospitals or industries. As Mina said, that 58% of what's going into garbage bins is organics, and that's material that can turn into to other things. And so it's been very, very important to classify our waste. And then that's what gives us the ability to make changes. If we don't, then we just keep the very, very passive and expensive and unsustainable method of just dumping everything in one place and thinking we can forget about it and leaving it as a problem for the next generation.
Thank you all so much for sharing. We'll move on to our next question. So what are the main barriers to implementing environmental changes and making goals into reality?
I think one of the things, I'll just say funding is always a challenge. That's something that's an answer for any action in the city. But I think education tied with communication, being able to actually share information about why these items are important and why these actions are important, because the city can provide a service like we talked about with the green bin, but to also let people know why it's important to use it and to have compliance and good results. And I mean, we have really good compliance with our blue bin, and there's always, you know, education that we fund to let people know what can go in the blue bin and why we can use it. But I think that's something that I've noticed has been a challenge to try and share that communication about why it's important. Liz, I don't know if you had a question for me.
So as like you mentioned the idea of education and all that stuff, but like what I feel is education is more targeted towards elementary school students in particular. I do understand that it is important to build their lifestyles, but I feel like high school students have more control over their lives to actually implement these into their lives. So would there be like, shouldn't we like somehow incorporate some of these educational systems into the high school systems?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and comment. I'm not as familiar with the curriculum for schools, but I know from the city lens, we support things like Student Action for a Sustainable Future, Caring for Your Watersheds, Yellowfish Road, and I do think lots of those are targeted for a younger age. So I think that's a really good point. 2 years ago, my colleague, Marin Lowen, and I hosted a youth climate action forum, and it was targeted for grade 8 to grade 12 students. And we were hosting another one last year, but it got canceled, not unsurprisingly. But I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts about maybe ways ways that we could get more of that education. But maybe I'll open space. I don't know if Katie has anything else to add around high school aged information that the city shares.
Yeah, I think you're right that we don't have much right now, but we do have expansion of our Student Action for a Sustainable Future program underway. So right now it is targeted to a younger age group, but we've just established a partnership with Nutrien. So we're going to be basically doubling the size of the program through that partnership. And that kind of is being developed this year. And the preliminary discussions I've been in have been about probably targeting an older group than we currently are rather than a younger group than we currently are, but it's still in development, so I can't make any commitments of what that looks like. But I think we're aware that there's that gap, and we have participated in Councillor Gersher and Councillor Lowen's event in the past and had hoped to last year. And think that's also another great opportunity where we can bring forward some of the things we're working on for some youth feedback and line it up with like the actual current things that the sustainability department is doing. So I think there's more potential. I think we could do more, and we're aware of that, but we're trying to reach a whole variety of different audiences as well. So it's hard to reach everybody, and I think we're working to improve that. And I don't know if we mentioned, there's also a youth spot on SEAC, which is our Saskatoon Environmental Advisory Committee. And maybe Councillor Gersher could speak to that, because I know she's also has been on the committee in the past, at least.
I can add something now. I did see Isra had her item up as well. So I'll leave it to Isra to tell me as the facilitator.
All right. Actually, I think for programs and things like that, there's not much going on in schools, in elementary and in high school. I think it would be very helpful to have more programs and things going on, to make, and even to hear what youth think and their ideas and their action plans, but not only to hear them, to do something to help the environment. I think we have a lot of programs in school, but not much about environment. I don't really know why. Is it because of funding, or is it just they ignore it? Even when I was in elementary, they kind of talked about recycling and reduce, reuse, but it just sounded like they didn't really care. It just, they wanted, I guess, to let us know, and then as soon as they could move on, they moved on from it and stopped talking about it.
Yeah, I like the program we have right now, the Student Action for a Sustainable Future, is really about, it is really up to the teacher to decide to participate in it and apply. And it's a kind of a smaller group. So it really is dependent on that kind of passionate teacher to do it. But those projects are action oriented. It isn't just about learning about all the things, it's about doing a project. And I think that's what we hope to replicate in the expansion of the program.
That was, I think your opinion on that, I think that is very valuable. Like, obviously we need to improve on many of aspects. Mayor Clarke, you had something to add.
Yeah, and I'm interested here that there's a sense, because the city doesn't, we don't have control over the education system, and I had thought that actually there was more environmental awareness going on in classes than what or in school. And I've met with some environmental group within, like Tommy Douglas Collegiate, I remember, and going and meeting with specific areas. But we're at a point where it's absolutely essential that this be part of your curriculum. And I guess what I'd like to just build on in terms of what the question about the barriers to implementing environmental changes and goals in reality. Let's just be frank, we're in Saskatchewan. For a long time, the difficulty in our province has been to actually get people to acknowledge our climate change, that we have to do something, that we've been so hung up on the debate about whether climate change is real or not, that there isn't enough, hard to actually move towards taking action and towards actually making steps. And I think one of the biggest barriers is that change is always something that people have a hard time with. And when we implemented recycling, which is on the waste diversion front, just to let you all know, it was actually a group of youth that came and spoke to council at the very last point where it was going to be a divided vote because people didn't want change, and they came and presented, and we got the recycling program over the line and got a program to have curbside recycling. The youth activism that happened, inspired by Greta Thunberg and some of the activities that even we had around City Hall, but around the world, had an impact in terms of getting people to say, okay, it's time to stop debating about whether climate change is real and move towards action. And just yesterday, we had an Environment, Utilities and Corporate Services Committee. It was presented to us the very hard work our staff are doing towards looking how do we take meaningful, specific steps around greenhouse gas emissions and around making a shift to a low carbon future. And I see a turning point happening in society right now where we're seeing more and more companies and community leaders and people saying, okay, it's time for us to make the shift. But there's still a lot of denial. There's still a lot of people that don't want to make that change, and who want to hold back even the ability to start doing things because of that resistance. And so having youth get organized into groups and talking and learning about what steps the city is trying to take, and being able, and I know this relates to some of the questions down next questions. It's actually important, and it actually, as I said, it made a difference in recycling. It made a difference in terms of getting us, because even on city council, you need to know there's going to be political support for what you're going to be putting forward. And if everybody's quiet, then you don't have that message. So we are at a very, very crucial point to get the support in the community to take steps. Thank you, Mina. I'm going to stop talking.
Thank you all for your amazing responses. Our next question is, what areas or how can adults and students work together in promoting more awareness regarding waste classification across different environments? Where do you think the youth voice will have the most impact? I'll start. I think where youth voice will have the most impact is probably in places where we spend the most time. So probably in schools, at work, wherever you work, and in your family or friend group. However, since I'm a teen, I don't have as much control over my home, my home environment, because I have my parents take care of that. But in my friends group, I make sure to mention projects like this that I'm working on, or whatever information I have about the environment, because maybe the more we educate, the more we share, the more we talk about it, maybe something will be done and we'll be able to make a difference. I'll pass on to Katrina.
Yeah, so before we have our last talk, I just would like to add on to Isra's point about what are we good at as youth. Yeah, we are most good at the places that we spend the most time in, and also we are the most good at like making trend. What do I mean by making trend is, for example, we are called the generation of digital world. For example, what are we most good at? Using our phones. I think we are the best generation ever compared to other generations in navigating these online, internet and stuff. So I think our best advantage is to amplify our voice using online platform, because we are good at just clicking those little text box or, just these little things online.
Mayor Clarke, you had something to add.
Yeah, well, I think I was mentioning earlier the role that youth can play, and I think everything that you've described, really, it does have an impact. The ability to use the social networks you have and social media to raise awareness on this. Talk to your friends, but also your parents. And also, we actually find often that we hear from parents whose kids bring home ideas from school that get them thinking differently, and it actually can have an impact. And so I would also encourage you to find ways to learn about what decisions the council is making, and because we have, for example, a program that we've just passed for home energy retrofits that we're actually going to be making a lot easier for people to make improvements in their homes to make them use less energy, better windows, better insulation, things like that, that are also can be a job creation opportunity, reduce our climate change impact and other things like that. Down the road, we're going to be building a better diversion center at called Recovery Park at our landfill. And as Katie mentioned, there's a whole plan for potentially doing things like banning certain products from the landfill. And there will be people who will come to council and say, don't do this. You're trying to force an environmental agenda on everybody else. And this is about tree hugging. And my understanding and view is that if we don't show the youth growing up here that we're actually paying attention to these things and building a city that is more responsible, it makes us less attractive as a place to live. And if we don't become part of those economies and those job opportunities of innovation in these areas, then that's missed opportunities for you to be part of those solutions. And so I think getting a youth representative, if you're interested in the environmental advisory committee, I think having youth groups within your high schools get organized and talk to each other about what's going on at the city or the province. The provincial government just decided that they're going to be the first province in the country to put a tax on electric vehicles, which to me is like, it's sending a message that we're not going forwards. We're resisting change. You know, speaking about what kind of future you want and what you expect from governments is all, you don't underestimate your voice. It doesn't mean every time you speak to an issue, you'll get exactly what you want, but it makes a difference to have those voices be heard and be part of it. And what Councillor Gersher and Lowen did to meet directly with high school students and build a better bridge between what the city's doing and what students who are concerned about these issues are doing was, I think, really awesome. And it was great leadership. You know, having people like Councillor Gersher on City Council now who have been environmentally engaged since before they became in politicians, and bring that heart and that spirit and that desire for change. That's not what was in place when I first got in council either. And so we have an opportunity now because of the people who are now pushing and came from being concerned citizens to being politicians. But we need to work together, absolutely, to paint a picture of what a strong future for our city is that you feel excited about growing up in and seeing opportunity here, and the vision that you hope to see for our city and our province.
I mean, I completely agree with everything the mayor has said, and to build on that, I think having worked on environmental issues for many years, I mean, it was in high school that I got interested about this and learned about climate change and solutions to climate change. And I know it's isolating, and sometimes it feels exhausting and tiring to work on this and not maybe seeing the change. And so I think it is important to celebrate the victories. And so like Mayor Clarke said, we have some great programs we've been able to put in place, and actually some long-term funding. Like, we have made some great strides over the last couple of years that I'm so proud of. And so remembering those to help kind of give energy for the next steps. But also, if this is something that is a passion for you, that you want to get involved and see change, there's a lot of organizations out there, so you don't have to do it alone. So if you're interested in waste, there's the Waste Reduction Council, but there's also the Nature Society, the Saskatchewan Environmental Society, Wild About Saskatoon. There's a Youth Climate Action or a Youth Climate Committee that formed out of the youth climate strikes. And I know within schools, there's different programs as well. I know I and my colleagues, I think Katie and her team are always happy to come to your class. We've had invitations from teachers and students to come. So super happy to be able to do that and come to you and actually talk about any of the things underway, and also to hear from you. So I know it's intimidating to think about coming to talk to council, or to even calling your counselor or the mayor. We all have websites, Facebook, our email, our phone number. I host monthly coffee with your counselor events. Lots of us are at different events or hosting them. Don't hesitate to come and talk to us or to come to council if you're interested in that. But you don't know how, send me an email, serena.gersher@saskatoon.ca. Like, I know sometimes City Hall is abstract and you don't know how to get involved, and our committees are kind of formal, but we want to hear from people, and we don't often hear from youth. And I don't want to I want to hear from you. So I'm really grateful that you've invited us today, and that you've also shared some of your thoughts and feedback. So I really appreciate that.
So for our action plan, our main goal is to have 4 bins available to high school classrooms, and that starts with the high schools we are in, so Bedford, Centennial, and those kind of high schools. To achieve this long-term goal, we are starting by applying our knowledge into our everyday life, and also working towards educating our peers and everyone around us, right? And because our social circles relies upon the youth we are around and some of the adults in our life, we encourage you guys to incorporate these into your everyday life and spread this knowledge into your social circles and bring awareness to this issue. Now, as a lot of you mentioned that you guys are doing lots of things to help bring attention to this issue. And I think spreading that knowledge through all of our social circles does bring people attention, and they do give, it does get people to work towards doing something. Along with that, we have started doing like this everything already. We have made a video, a survey, and also a Instagram page through which we advocate. We will be sharing with you the survey and the video earlier next week through email, and hopefully you can spread that onto your social circles. With our survey, we found that lots of people, they had accessibility problems, specifically with bins, because they said wherever we go, we only see garbage bins, and we don't really see any other bins to sort our waste. So that prevents them from doing that. Additionally, education is also another problem, because people don't know what goes into each bin, and they're like, it's just too much information, we can't do that. So as we are just starting out, I would like to ask how you can make space for us on the table, as in like not just for our voices, but for someone to take actions, because we were involved in this We Day action plan thing. And what happened was, we spent the whole day making an action plan, but then it just disappeared into thin air. Nothing really happened with that action plan, and we tried incorporating it, but nobody really helped us to get that thing going. So how can you guys help us amplify our voices into like just beyond our circles and into maybe your social circles?
If I can start, I just want to like touch on kind of where some of your ideas fit into our waste plan, just so you know kind of where we're at with that. In terms of recycling and organics in schools, we're putting in place right now a program where we're going to require all businesses and organizations, which include schools, to have recycling and organics containers available. Part of my discussions with school facility folks, so more on the people who actually like put the bins in place and make sure there's somebody to empty them and that sort of thing, not necessarily the teachers or the students, but they're really concerned about how the logistics work inside of a school. So we propose to do an organics pilot, less so for recycling because that can easily be collected, but organics, they're worried about things like smells like rodents or insects or things like that causing problems. So I am in the process of, we have a bit of funding to do a pilot for that. So it would probably only be a couple of schools to figure out a system that could work for all schools, and be doing that in partnership with school boards. So I'm hoping to get started on that more this summer. Regarding recycling and organics containers in public spaces, we know that's an issue and concern as well, and we're actually putting together, sorry, Councillor Gersher, the mayor probably don't want to hear it, a budget request for 2022-2023 budget that is about the city kind of leading by example at our own facilities and places, and making sure that we do have recycling and organics in place, because we know it's confusing. Right now, we did an inventory of our own facilities, and we found blue garbage cans that are this exact same color as blue recycling bins. And we found some that are beautiful, but they're all white, and they just have like little pictures or words on them, and it might not be obvious. So, and others, they're like, they want to have recycling in place, but all they have is a bucket. And so we want to have that standardized and clear. And we know that having consistency between where you work, where you play, where you go to school, and where you live helps improve waste sorting. So that's one of the reasons why when we put forward a proposal that council approved for recycling and organics, we suggested matching for schools and for businesses and organizations. We suggested matching what's in the residential program, because then we can educate consistently across our whole city and have consistent signages and consistent colors. And we think that's really going to help. So that's kind of a bit of where we're at. And I don't know if there's maybe an opportunity to work with one of your schools on a organics pilot. I mean, in part it was kind of been COVID delayed just because we're not allowed in schools right now, and that makes that work harder and slower. But there might be an opportunity.
It is definitely exciting to hear that like something is on the way, right? And one thing that I would like to add is like, are there any ways that youth specifically, obviously with the pandemic, it is difficult, but later on, are there any specific ways youth can actually get into those programs that you're mentioning it's coming?
I think like we're going to be requiring schools to have those bins outside of their buildings. So I think it would be helping support it being successful inside the school. Whether it's it's an elementary school, but Nicole Victoria, for example, had a group of very passionate students helping sort waste and organics in particular, and they were composting on site. But they were helping to provide that education and monitoring of the program, and I think, but I don't know what's possible for all schools, because it is a lot of effort, I think, on behalf of the school, and it's hard to ask teachers or students to always be the ones doing that when it should be just business as usual, perhaps. But I think getting started, there's going to be a lot of change. And assisting with that change would be very helpful from my perspective. And finding out what's working and not working by working with the schools and students, not just the facility folks, is, I think, a step forward for us. And I see others want to speak, so I will be quiet.
Yes, Mayor Clarke, you have your heart up. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, and this, in a way, this is an opportunity. Katie's working very hard to bring about a change in the way both within the city and within the partners that we have in the community are thinking about waste, and people are having a hard time with it. Even in my own office, this is now my garbage bin. So they've given us a teeny tiny garbage bin and a big recycle bin. And this is to change our behavior, right, Katie? So that we throw less stuff in the garbage and more stuff in the recycling, but we haven't gotten to the place where we have organics yet. And so what Katie's describing is that the city actually trying to push groups like schools and others to adopt this, because all the stuff they're throwing in the garbage that could be recycled ends up in our landfill, and it becomes a future cost to future generations. What I would suggest is your opportunity is that if there's going to be this pressure on the school board from the city, then if students write to the school board and say, we want to do this, the school board, who is the elected body that has oversight over the decisions that the school system makes, that'll make them realize, okay, there's actually an appetite for this among students. And so I think it's better for me to suggest that than Katie probably, but that's how you can have your voices be heard, is if you're putting action. It's really great that you've decided we're going to pick this action and we're going to come up with a strategy. One of the suggestions I would have for that strategy, it would be to write to the school board. Another one could be to actually write a letter to our Environment, Utilities and Corporate Services committee, which is a committee that's made up of 5 city councillors plus the mayor, is working on issues related to waste and waste diversion, to kind of bring this to a bit of a higher level of awareness, which would then lead to that also influencing this wider conversation. So those would be 2 suggestions of specific steps that you could take to kind of keep raising awareness and saying that you're interested in doing?
Yes, we definitely agree with that. Like our plan for this year is to create a proposal, including some of the costs and some of the things that like require for our action plan, and presenting that proposal to our principals or to the school board and writing letters with that. And I think you have a big role on that you guys can help us write some letters and give us that credibility to appeal to the school board. Now, again, I think that like accessibility is one of the biggest factors in encouraging people to get to these things. One thing we are facing is like costs are always the issue, right? So are there any community funds that we as youth can apply for? And if yes, then how accessible are they?
Yeah, we have environmental grants that I think it's $30,000 a year, maybe 60. I don't remember the exact number. But every year we offer environmental grants. That's an application process. And so I anticipate as a school group or as a group of youth, you would be able to apply. The application would be on the website, and Katie might be able to provide a bit more context. The project that I was talking about that I read today about the youth that were doing plastic into supplies for 3D printing, they got money from their school division. They were the Greater Catholic School Division, as well as from, I think, EcoSask, who puts small grants out on a regular basis. And so I think if there's a specific area you're interested in, like I know there's also I'm gonna get the name wrong, Outdoor Sask. I think they also have outdoor themed granting available depending on the activity, so it might narrow down depending on what item, but from a waste standpoint, that's what I can picture. I'll let you know if I think of anything else.
I'll just add, yeah, the environmental cash grant currently has $54,000, $10,000 which is dedicated to waste-related projects. And actually, this year's funding has already been adjudicated, and it is closed, but it'll open up again it's usually December to February. It's open, and we then take a month or two to do all the assessments and reporting out on it before the money actually ends up in the hands of the groups. So it's actually going to committee next week, I think. So I think, yeah, this year I think you would be too late for, but next year that would be an option. But it doesn't really line up with the school year very well. And I think we're thinking as it grows whether we need to have kind of 2 rounds of funding. So yeah, I appreciate any feedback you might have on that.
As Councillor Serena mentioned that like if the information is on your website, I feel that like personally the city website can be overwhelming because it's like filled with jam-packed information. Is there a way to like get these information about funds and this kind of stuff like into community letters, or maybe like getting them to school counselors that they can spread to youth?
Yeah, I think we could add that to kind of our we typically don't do a lot of advertising for it because I think it's just been around for a while. We do maybe a couple social media posts, but not and messages to kind of groups that have applied in the past, but I think we could probably do a better job advertising it and include schools and community groups on the list of those who we notify when it goes live.
And if you're ever looking for information that you can't find, you can send an email to the general contact form on the city website, and someone will be able to respond with an information or to be able to direct you to where you're looking, or to call our dashboard numbers, 306-975-2476. They'll be able to direct you. So if you're looking for something and you can't find it, you can also send me an email. but I know we also share granting information kind of from a community standpoint with our community associations. And so sometimes that kind of gets it to another level, but that's good feedback around kind of touching base with schools as well. I don't know if in the past we've done for groups with Student Action for a Sustainable Future, like groups that participate in that because it's action orientated, whether or not through that process they're made aware of potentially granting, like the Caring for Your Watersheds program has funding available, and it's youth targeted, funding available to implement your actions that are water and watershed related. So that's, yeah, one specific route. I always find it helpful if there's like a specific project or action you're interested in, then I can like help you more with the specifics around that, because otherwise I just like cast a wide net of things that are available. But yeah, now I'm rambling.
Well, guys, that was a productive yet exciting hour that we just spent together. I'm so thrilled to hear these amazing thoughts to collaborate and fuse. Although we would love to continue our conversation and hear more from you, we would have come to the end of this session.
And lastly, I would like to end up our meeting with this quote from Simon Maywarring. It wish a welcoming change to our Saskatoon community. Effectively, change is almost impossible without industrial-wide collaboration, cooperation, and consensus. Thank you so much for your time today, and we will see you later. Goodbye and have a great day.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.